and welcome to the Sportsnaut interview. And today we are joined by college basketball writer Michael DeCourcy, who covers college basketball for the Sporting News. And believe it or not, college basketball just around the corner tips off next week on Monday, November 4th. And so Michael is here joining us today to just go through some of the larger storylines heading into the season. Michael, thank you very much for your time today.
Oh, happy to do it.
So let's first start with storyline number one that I have here on my list of topics here, and that is conference realignment. We've had a chance now to see how it's worked in the world of college football, and now we're going to have a chance to see how it affects college basketball. Now, 20 teams this year moving to new conferences. So I just want to get your thoughts on it. Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Do you think it's a bad thing for the game or a good thing for the game?
Well, I've liked it in college football because one of the issues in college football has been that there's not enough intersectional play. There was not enough interconference play. And it's effectively they've gotten that by putting teams in the same conference. So even though there has been the challenge of establishing the value of a victory in college football, because most teams now are going to play the vast majority, or have decided, at least in the short term, to play the vast majority of their games against lesser opponents in order to preserve themselves for the depth and strength of the big time conferences we have now. Even though we have that, we still are able to see teams from other parts of the country play one another. I attended a California Pitt game. Now, if I'd done that even a year ago, that would have been a non-conference game. It was an ACC game this year. We saw Washington play teams in the Big Ten like Michigan. We saw USC travel to the Big House to play the Wolverines. We saw that great game between Ohio State and Oregon out in the Pacific Northwest, and we've seen Texas play against elite SEC opposition now. So we're getting all of that intersectional flavor that we really missed in college football for the most part, except when it came to the postseason. And the postseason in the past was kind of phony. I mean, the ball games didn't matter, and the tournament was basically arranged for the privilege of a select few. Now we have a real championship, a real playoff, a team like Indiana. What makes their situation so extraordinary is not just that they are undefeated this deep into the season. It's that what that can convey. In the past, an Indiana fan could say, okay, this is awesome, we're having fun, but if we lose to Ohio State, we're going to the Independence Bowl or whatever, whichever. Yeah. Now you can look at it and say, we can lose to Ohio State and still play for the national championship. And maybe even play for the Big Ten championship, depending on how the tiebreakers and all that work out. So it just conveys so much more importance now. And it's not this, it won't be the same in basketball because, well, we will get that more of that intersectional play. We always got kind of a pretty good dose of that in the pre-conference, especially for those leagues that were smart enough to make sure their teams played enough high-level opposition out of the league. We've got Maui, we've got the Bahamas, we've got the various ESPN events. So we always had that. And in the postseason, we already have an arranged apparatus that is near perfection. So it won't have the same impact on the season that it's had in football, but it will have the same impact on the athletes. I mean, they're going to have to get on those planes and they're going to have to travel a long distance, and it will have an impact on them.
Yeah, certainly travel. The distances are one of the major things that we're seeing here with the new realignment. The other topic that I wanted to get to you about, discuss with you is new coaches in new places. Now, every year we see a lot of turnover with the coaches, and I want to ask you about a couple here specifically, get some of your thoughts on them. I want to ask you about Calipari going over to Arkansas. Mark Pope takes over at Kentucky. Dusty May with Michigan. Eric Musselman at USC. Darren DeVries at West Virginia. There's a lot of others as well that I didn't list, but those are some of the more intriguing ones, in my opinion. Which of these coaches do you think can step in and have the most immediate success right away?
Well, I think Calipari, in his circumstance, he took with him, several players who had been at Kentucky, as well as several recruits who had committed to be Wildcats. So I think the way Kentucky's fans handled these last 4 or 5 years was a massive mistake. The idea that you get tired of something because it doesn't go quite the way you wanted it to. I mean, that's all. I grew up a Pittsburgh Steelers fans. That, you know, there are fans in the base that do that, but those who understand the culture of the franchise and why it's been successful for more than a half century understand stability has a value. You're not going to be great every year, even at Kentucky. And especially not in this environment where players are turning over so quickly. And I think the Kentucky's fans, not that they will pay greatly for it because they hired a terrific coach in Mark Pope and they're going to do well, but they walked away from a Hall of Fame coach who had been extraordinary and I think can continue to be so in his new position. And they got the great NIL budget. And I think that will really help them. And I think as well, I think Arkansas will see the value of a significant basketball product when you get into revenue sharing and all of that. I think Arkansas will see that. Certainly Kentucky will as well. But I think Arkansas will make sure that Calipari gets what he needs to be exceptional. DeVries at West Virginia, I think he's a really good hire. I really like what he did at Drake. His teams were always well coached. They were always in the right place. It doesn't hurt that his son's a terrific player and still had some eligibility to go with him. Yep. I think he'll make a big difference. It's going to be fascinating to watch Mark Pope in his first year at Kentucky because he's got basically an entirely new roster. And when you come in as a new coach, it's a new roster to you anyway. But in this case, they're all new to each other. And some of them are new to the high major level, to the SEC level. A lot of players make that transition extremely well. We saw Dalton Connect make that transition from second team All Big Sky in 2023 to first team All American and the second best player in the country in 24. So a lot of them make it successfully. Some don't. And if you get too high a percentage of players who don't make that transition well, that can be problematic. I don't think that'll be the case at Kentucky, but it is something to watch out for.
Storyline number 3, the transfer portal. We have seen how that has really kind of reshaped the landscape of college sports, along with the NIL, as we mentioned, and conference realignment as well. But we have seen huge numbers of players going into the portal. So it's hard to even keep track of these players, which team they're on from year to year. But is there a transfer that you could think of, or maybe two, that you think, looking at their new location, landed in a really good spot and they could really help their new team out?
Well, I think DJ Wagner is an interesting case because I saw him play at Kentucky last year and was not impressed at all. I thought he looked like an overrated player, rated on his ability to be physical against high school players that wasn't going to translate at the Division I level. And that's what we saw throughout last year. And Cal continued to invest in him. And does it pay off this year for a different school? I mean, I'm hearing good things about what DJ's doing out at Arkansas. So that, that's something to consider, that, perhaps that'll make a big difference for them. For the Razorbacks, that having Boogie Fland and DJ in the backcourt will Boogie, a freshman recruit who was originally committed to Kentucky and is someone that I really like as a prospect, and having him come in as well. I think that, that'll be interesting to see whether or not that backcourt can play at a really high level, because they're going to have to. I mean, if Arkansas is going to be what Cal wants them to be, they're absolutely going to have to play well. As I mentioned before, Kentucky's got an almost entirely new team, full of transfers. Lamont Butler, who did such a great job at San Diego State, and made one of the big shots in recent Final Four history when he was there. He has a chance to be really good at Kentucky. I think they maybe have more talented transfers and guys who are more productive, but he's the guy I think that he'll bring a stability to what, as I said, was a very transitory group.
Now, outside of Arkansas, is there another team out there that you think, when you look at all the different people they brought in through the portal, I think of a team like Kansas. They were a little shorthanded last year. They had to deal with some injuries down the stretch into the tournament. Bill Self went out and hit the portal real hard to bring in some depth and some players who have been around a while. But are there any other teams out there that you think hit a home run through the portal?
Yeah, I mean, I love AJ Storr. I thought he was terrific at Wisconsin. And I'll be fascinated to see how he does with Kansas. I think he's got a chance to be really special. They have a great center in terms of production with Hunter Dickinson and then DeJuan Harris, who's he's the definition of reliable college point guard. And now he'll be that because he's going to play it. He's going to do it a fifth time. He's a guy that. Just in Harris, that you just know what you're getting every single night, and it's always going to be the right thing. And so you put a dynamic player like AJ Storr in the middle of that, and I think he could have an extraordinary season. I'm very excited to see what he does there at Kansas. There are a lot of transfers all around the country, and I don't want to forget about the freshmen. I mean, I think freshmen are going to make an impact as well, even though I think we're kind of getting toward the end of the COVID thing with players having extra years. So there'll be some guys who are 23, 24, 25 in this year's college. I mean, I think this freshman class is really good. VJ Edgecombe at Baylor is an exceptional talent. Of course, Cooper Flagg at Duke is going to be an extraordinary player. One of my favorite prospects. I wrote when he committed or signed or whatever at Duke, that he was the best prospect in American high school basketball since honestly, since Anthony Davis. Because although we did see at Duke Zion Williamson supersede his high school ratings in a way that made him, the best freshman that we've seen since Anthony. He was only the fourth player in his class for the most part. He outperformed. He was underrated by the analysts in the 2019 season. We don't see that with Cooper. People know what he's bringing, and he comes in with great celebration from the media, from the scouts, and from coaches who've seen him and worked with him. And so I think that's something that we haven't seen in a while, as I mentioned, more than a decade. And I'm excited about that because I think we need that in college basketball. We need those guys that are super prospects and that can carry that on, to be high overall NBA draft picks and then very successful in the league.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up freshmen. That is one of the other topics that I wanted to ask you about. And so you've already given us some of your thoughts on that. And just to kind of piggyback off your point, I do think sometimes with all of the stuff we're hearing about with the transfer portal, it really kind of the incoming freshmen now kind of get overlooked when it used to be all about the one and done. Now I think the attention in college basketball has shifted towards bringing in guys who have experience, who are mature, who have played 2 or 3 years versus leaning on those young freshmen to try to get it done. We've seen some teams get it done with a little bit of both. One of those teams is UConn, and that brings me to storyline number 5 here. They're looking for a three-peat this year, and I was looking at the preseason rankings. We have Kansas, who's ranked number 1, followed by Alabama. UConn's Kansas number 1, Alabama number 2, UConn number 3, Houston number 4, and Iowa State number 5. If it's not UConn this year with the three-peat, who are some of the teams that you think, and I know it's hard to predict at this point, we haven't even tipped a game off yet, but on paper, who are some of the teams that you think could make a deep March run and dethrone UConn?
See, I think Alabama should be number 1, and I know a lot of my colleagues in the media who would put out individual projections have put Alabama at the top of their list. That to me is the deepest, most talented team that we have. They have the requisite NBA draft picks. Does Kansas have one of those guys? I mean, maybe AJ. I really like him, but a lot of the rest of their roster is guys like Hunter and Dewan, who are really good college players, excellent college players, but not pros necessarily. I mean, they may play in the league, but they won't be first round picks. And we've got, gosh, now 40 years of history nearly that says you have to have guys who are first round picks. Not since 1987, when Indiana won it with Steve Alford as their star, have we had a champion that didn't have at least one first round pick on their roster. And in most cases, it was more than one. And I think Alabama has more than one. And they've got a great approach. Now, they'll have to defend better than they did a year ago. They were not a good defensive team last year. I think they can be better with the group they have now, with the depth they have now. Nate Oates has been a good defensive coach in the past. He just did not have a group that was built for that last year. So I think that they need to play better defensively in order for me to be right. But that's the team I look at first. I have a lot of enthusiasm about Duke and their possibilities because of Flagg and some of the other players that they're bringing in. I'm a little concerned about point guard because their point guard from last year went to the NBA. Do they have the right guy? That would be one reason not to pick them, but there are a lot of reasons to select them. UConn, I love what they have. In a lot of ways for UConn, it's a huge plus for them to have won 2 in a row in terms of their ability to do it this year, because they know what it takes. Alex Caravan knows exactly what it takes to be a champion. He's done it twice now. So he knows, but there's also the burden of trying to do it again. And maybe once you've done it twice, the burden's not the same. The repeat burden is there for the team that's the reigning champion. But maybe if you've done it twice, you don't really think about it in that sense anymore. Hey, we already repeated. We're just trying to win this one. Maybe it's not the same. So I like their roster. I like their team. Again, a little bit concerned at point guard there as well. Tristan Newton was so terrific. So losing him has an impact. But they've got some good young players that they can plug in there and see where it takes them. And I also, I look at some other teams that could maybe come from a little bit deeper in my rankings. Somebody like Baylor that could be very dangerous. Edgecombe is a player that I think he's going to wake up some people to the possibilities of what freshmen can accomplish when they start to see him play.
Well, it all gets underway on Monday, November 4th. There's a lot of great storylines heading into the season. I'm excited for it to start. I know you are too. Michael DeCourcy, everybody from the Sporting News. We appreciate your time today, Michael. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it.